I'm Curtis Wong. I work for Microsoft Research, a little group called Next Media Research. I was involved in new media, if you want to call it that, for about 10 years before I got to Microsoft, and I thought it was time to think about what was coming next, so I named the group Next Media. So that's a group. We're a small group of about 5 people, and most of what we do is primarily developing technologies and products and services that are about 4 to 6 years down the line. But in my spare time, I also spend time doing work related to education and technology, and I have a long relationship with PBS that goes back more than a decade with Martha and some, with GBH on a number of projects. The question of all of the things I've been doing is like, I realize it's all related to the meaning of more, because with traditional video, the way you get more is essentially for video to be longer. And what kinds of things can we do to enable deeper understanding without necessarily having it be longer? And so my roots go back. I worked at the Voyager company almost 20 years ago. And what we were doing back then was we were producing feature films, and more to us meant letterboxing, showing more of the picture, providing director's commentaries, all those things that you are pretty familiar with in terms of DVDs nowadays. But the powerful thing that I learned in terms of working with a lot of directors was the importance of story and narrative in terms of engaging an audience. And after I left Voyager, I went to another company called Continuum, when we started doing more of the CD-ROMs that I also started doing at Voyager. And the first one I did was something called A Passion for Art. And I think the problem that I felt with a lot of CD-ROMs at that time is that they didn't really do very much in terms of, it was all about the quantitative nature of the information. And I felt narrative was really, really important. And so one of the things we did with this CD-ROM is we had a whole series of narratives, from the welcome to a tour about Dr. Barnes, if you know who he was. If you didn't, a gallery tour, a thematic tour, and a story of the creation of a singular work of art. And that's sort of the narrative. But underneath the narrative, there's this important missing layer that traditionally you don't get with video, which is a contextual exploration layer. And there, in this particular title, we had a gallery where you could sort of get a sense of where the paintings are, what rooms they are, how big they are, all that sort of spatial information that you typically don't get in books or video. And then we also had temporal-based context in terms of showing the works of art in relation to other events of the time. And at the bottom layer is what we're calling the archive, where we have access to documents and other things, original source information. So in a sense, the narrative provides a way to engage you on a particular subject. The context allows you to explore in ways that are of interest to you and develop mental models of the information, and then having the source information at the bottom allows you a way to develop sort of and validate some of your understanding from that mental model. I'd show a Passion for Art, but then we'd shoot another hour. So that particular architecture, we continued with another project called Leonardo da Vinci, which is about the Codex Leicester. If you know, it's one of Leonardo's notebooks. And I'll go into this here. This is when I went to Corbis. So what we tried to do with these is always start with a very brief story to engage you into this subject.
In order to give the true science of the flight of birds, we must first give the science of the wind. It should not pass without leaving some memory. The air moves like a river and carries the clouds with it that we see in an ancient tree. A genius of man may make various inventions, but it will never discover a more beautiful one than nature senses. I am not to be accused of either.
So I'll go to the homepage here. Leonardo liked to use organic metaphors for his ideas. So we use the idea of a tree. And so the tree represents Leonardo in his life. The roots are in the Renaissance. So these are narratives, if you will, a background of the Renaissance. The trunk represents his life, his thinking, and a discussion of nature. And this is about the Codex Leicester. If you know about the Leicester is about the earth, the water, and the heavens. So the tree branches into 3 different branches. And these are contextual narratives and explorations about those particular topics. And then the fruit of the tree is a gallery of all of Leonardo's work, as all of his paintings and drawings, as well as the Codex Leicester itself. I'll play you just a tiny bit of what I mean by a narrative
In
here.
1690, by the great power of gold, a painter named Giuseppe Gezzi acquired a remarkable manuscript. It concerned the weight and motion of the waters, and was composed, written, and illustrated by the illustrious painter and geometrician Leonardo da Vinci. An inscription identified its former owner as Guglielmo della Porta, a sculptor who had died in 1577.
So that's an example of a narrative. You can sort of see what's ahead if you wanted to jump ahead. You can always go anywhere directly within the title to an exhibit or a gallery, but let's go to the Codex Leicester itself. Anybody here seen the Codex Leicester? It was at American Museum of Natural History about 8 years ago, just a few. And so these are all the themes that are in the Leicester. If you click on astronomy, it tells you which pages have astronomy. You can go to the individual pages itself. There's insight from Martin Kemp,
always insisted on
who's an expert on Leonardo at Oxford. But you can look at the page itself. Now, you know he wrote backwards, of course, and we can change that so that you can read Italian if you know Italian. But one of my ideas was to come up with a translator, which we call the codoscope, so you can see the writing in context. And you can actually also turn this into Italian, so you can try and read his writing, such as here you can see Sole and Luna. But when you do look at this, you realize that he writes in first person because he's having these little intellectual arguments with himself. But this is an example of sort of interaction and contextual exploration that you just can't get in linear form or in a book as well. And those are always the kinds of things that when we did these kinds of interactive titles, that what are we doing that can't be done better in any other medium? So by 1997, 98, I had gone to Intel and I was a director of content there. And one of the things they were going to do was the first enhanced digital television broadcast in the US. And what they were planning to do was they were going to send a test pattern of the Indian from one end of the country to the other. And I said, you know, that's got to be the most boring thing that you can think of. And we should do something more interesting. They said, well, what do you suggest? I said, well, you know, I know Ken Burns is working on Frank Lloyd Wright. I've worked with Ken before on another project. Let me call him up and let's see if we can do something interesting. And what we did was something called the Poetry of Structure, which is about 3 of the buildings he did, Unity Temple, Falling Water, and the Guggenheim. And in this, we have sort of that same architectural narrative in terms of there's an introduction, these narrative stories, and then there's contextual explorations where you can actually go inside those buildings. And unfortunately, I don't think we have enough time to do that yet either, but we'll keep going. And so another experiment we did was with American Experience in 1998, thinking about how you can generate related information to a television broadcast. And one of the things we tried to do was use the closed caption information and have that drive links to source information underneath. And that might be an encyclopedia, might be an atlas, and might be other things. So this was an experiment in that, and actually we learned quite a bit from doing this. I think I'll skip forward too. So through the process of these experiments, I've sort of come down to what I'm calling sort of the layered contextual narrative, which is finding out a way to build up links between the narrative layer and this contextual layer, which is exploration and simulation, so that you can explore a narrative, find something interesting, go down deep into the exploration area, through association find other things you're interested in, come back up into another part of the narrative related to that, or else go down deeper into source information. And so the first application we were thinking about doing this with was thinking about sort of interactive television. And this was the year 2000, 7 years ago. And at that time, most of interactive television was pretty much constrained to set-top box deployments, which were fairly small in number. And we really never knew if there was a big enough audience in terms of the content, whether things were working or not. And so we felt that broadband internet was really sort of the future of television. And so in collaboration with Howard Cutler and Mike Sullivan as part of the Frontline team, we picked Commanding Heights, which, because we wanted it to be broadband, we wanted a program that people could get at that time, and pretty much only higher ed and business had broadband around the year 2000. And so Commanding Heights is a 6-hour television series that we streamed entirely online in terms of 3 nights. And the program was created from its conception as something that would live on television as well as live on the web. And that the television essentially would be the spine of the experience, but that would be just the beginning in terms of its links to deeper information. And the other constraints about traditional linear television are you're constrained by not only the duration of the film, but also maintaining continuity of the narrative arcs that you're trying to create. And through the process of shooting Commanding Heights, they knew a lot of this was also going to live on the web, so we could tell stories online in a way that couldn't necessarily be done within the constraints of even a 6-hour television series. So this is Commanding Heights. I'll see if I can pull it up here. So this is, Commanding Heights aired in 2002, and it aired briefly, I think, during Pledge Drive at the end of the year, and it hasn't been on since. So this is the site. So the number of components are Storyline, which is essentially the entire television program online. There's an interactive time atlas, individual country reports, and then information about people and ideas that are brought up in the show. So you can look at the second night, and there are different chapters, and call up, say, this chapter with Jeffrey Sachs. So you can also go anywhere directly. Well, let's just skip forward here.
But an economic system needs years.
So you notice links are appearing on the left.
Whenever Soviet power was challenged in Eastern Europe, the response was very clear. It was tanks, it was the Red Army. That was the case in Berlin in 1953, Budapest in 1956, Prague 1968. The answer was different in Warsaw in 1989. Solidarity won 99 out of 100 seats. The head of the Polish Communist Party called Moscow for directions. Mickey.
So you can go to what was happening in Poland at that year. I think my computer's been in. So this is the interactive time app where you see the colors of the country correspond to the political economic system at the time, as well as different flashpoints that happened. We're talking about 1989 and the fall of the Berlin Wall, and so you can click and you get a country report about Germany, etc., as well as there is a complete search engine in here. Oh, type too fast. Which basically calls up every instance of hyperinflation in the glossary, essays, debates, country reports, interviews, and the Storyline program, as well as other flashpoints that you saw on the atlas. So let's go back to here. Interesting thing about this program is that the television program aired once and shortly again afterwards, but the audience for Commanding Heights continued to grow substantially. Even it's been 7 years now, and it's still, I think now it's in the top 30, but up until I think even last year it was in the top 10 if you do a search for like world economy in the pick your search engine. So I think one of the interesting key learnings from this is sort of the value of sort of long-tail distribution of a program that's on the web. If you look at the cost in terms of the audience that you reach versus a television show that's a one-shot versus something that's an ongoing resource on the web, it's proven to be a very effective way to do that. Another big concern when we were first doing this was taking the entire television show and putting it out on the web. Is that going to cannibalize video sales? I think we found that that's actually not the true. It really helped generate and support the cost of video, DVD sales later. After that time, I also worked with Frontline on a program called The Age of AIDS that aired last summer. And very similar architecture, narrative, spatial, temporal, contextual exploration, and I won't get into that there. I'm going to show quickly the next project we're doing called Worldwide Telescope. And this is sort of, I'm really going to zip through these slides here. Taking the idea of narrative and doing it in a very different way. Because what we're creating is we're creating this middle layer, which is sort of the virtual sky, where we're bringing together data from the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, which we helped make public on something called Sky Server in 2002, as well as data from Hubble and the Spitzer Space Telescope and others into an aggregated virtual sky. And then you can imagine episodes of like perhaps Nova or lectures from a person at Harvard or, you name it. All of these narratives can be embedded into the virtual sky with a little bit of metadata, and then underneath the objects, you'll have access to source data from them as well. I'll show you the prototype that we have right now, and let me go to that. So this represents 2.5 people's work for about 3 months so far. And this is sort of our part-time project. I'm going to close this. Okay. So you're looking at the virtual sky here. If you look over to the left, this is the Milky Way. This is not an image of Milky Way. It's actually procedurally generated from 2-mass data, which is color rendered correctly and positionally correct within the sky for the world coordinate system. Let's find something that everybody knows. Okay, so here is, can you turn the lights down a little? I don't know if anybody can see this. So you're looking at the Milky Way, I mean the Big Dipper. Yeah, we'll get dark here in a second. Okay, so here's the Big Dipper, and we'll go in and look at just in an area perhaps below the Big Dipper, and we'll transition from this to a fuzzy patch in the center. And if I continue to go into a fuzzy patch, this is where we make the transition from ground-based observation to space-based imagery, which is from the Hubble. And what you're looking at is 2 galaxies that are actually colliding. And Tom mentioned before about gravitational aggregation of hydrogen causing star formation. That's essentially what's going on right here.
That's it.
Yeah. If you look in another part of the area below the Milky Way here. Let me find, let's look around here. You notice that there's seems to be galaxies everywhere. All these little fuzzy patches are galaxies. Here's an interesting one. This one is called, I think it's M81. So this particular galaxy is about 100,000 light years. And in the center is a supermassive black hole, about 36 million solar masses. And you can sort of see this, what looks like a very round yellow bubble. But if you look at this in X-ray or infrared, there's quite a bit of activity that comes outside of the center. And if you look here on the spiral arms, this area here and this area down here, what's also happening there is that's also an area where gravitational wave is compressing the hydrogen. And of course, and then all these objects you can also then connect to other related information from a number of other federated services that are on the web, as well as create imagery for that astronomers want to be able to use on any particular object. So we hope to release this sometime this fall. The process that we're in right now is we're creating a number of exemplar narratives. And this is what the UI will look like when we're done. And we'll have simulations embedded within objects and the ability to author and create experiences within this virtual space. So this is our sort of scenario that a kid might, engage in a particular story about astronomy, go as deep as they want, go and actually explore because they're able to browse the entire sky behind any objects or connections to other narratives and links to other sort of related things, as well as have access to the source data and the same data that astronomers have. So anyway, that's it, and I'm way out of time. Thank you.